Hello, and welcome to part 2 of our Supporting Neurodivergent Thinkers series offered by the Counseling Center at Western Washington University. In this particular session, we're going to explore the concept of ableism and how it may influence those who are neurodivergent. First, we're going to review a definition of ableism and some of its qualities before discussing ways this may impact folks who are neurodivergent and some issues related to intersectionality or intersectional identities when it comes to ableism. So here is a definition from an advocate and somebody living with disabilities named Leah Smith, who defines ableism as a set of beliefs or practices that devalue and discriminate against people with physical, intellectual, or psychiatric disabilities that often rests on the assumption that disabled people need to be, quote, fixed in one form or another. So I'll just give you a moment to kind of soak in that definition. I'd invite you to read it again on your own. If you are able. So one thing I want to notice is I'm already somebody who has a lot of interest in this topic, but I'm still on a learning journey myself. So me assuming everybody can read the text on the screen is in fact ableist. And so we're always kind of learning and growing and making mistakes as we go along. But hopefully reading the definition out loud was helpful for those of you joining us who might be visually impaired. Okay, so we're going to focus on a couple of different types of ableism and the forms that they can take. So there's a lot of great information about ableism out there on the internet. I would especially look, though, for resources from people who are living with disabilities or people who are disabled or disabled people. There's a lot of different ways we can use the vocabulary here, but first we'll focus on systemic or institutional ableism. So some examples of this would be buildings that are not wheelchair accessible or sidewalks that are not ADA or American with Disabilities Act compliant. Another form of systemic or institutional ableism could be continued segregation in schools for students with disabilities, leading to unequal education. So those are a few examples of systemic or institutional forms of ableism. Next, we'll move on to interpersonal. So this is ableism that takes place in social interactions and relationships. For example, the parent of a child with a disability might try to, quote, cure the disability rather than accept it. And that aspect of acceptance is one thing we're going to talk about specifically in this workshop series, as it is for supporters of people living with neurodiversity. Internalized is a really interesting concept. So this is the idea that if a person is in fact themselves disabled or living with a disability, they may consciously or unconsciously believe the harmful messages they hear about disability and apply it to themselves. So we're going to really explore this concept and its related impacts throughout the rest of these presentations as well. So those are the types of ableism. In terms of forms of ableism, they can come in a few different packages. So hostile, that may be pretty self-explanatory, but this is openly aggressive behaviors or policies on that systemic level that could include bullying, abuse, and violence. Benevolent ableism is an interesting idea. So this is a form of ableism that views people with disabilities as weak, vulnerable, or in need of rescuing. So this is a patronizing form of ableism, and it really undermines a person's individual autonomy and can unfortunately reinforce an unequal power dynamic. And then ambivalent ableism is kind of a mix of both hostile and benevolent ableism. And, you know, somebody could start kind of being benevolently ableist in a social interaction, let's say, and they may treat somebody in a patronizing way, and then switch to being more hostile if somebody objects to that patronizing behavior. So wanted to break down how ableism can manifest in various forms. Very important concept here, ableism and intersectionality. So folks with multiple identities may feel further marginalized by ableism. So I think one way that this can look specific to neurodiversity is with invisibility and misdiagnosis. So it basically points to the fact that research validates an under or misdiagnosis of people of color, folks who are female presenting, assigned female at birth or femme, and those misdiagnoses or undiagnosed conditions are specifically clear when we look at the research on autism and ADHD. So to summarize, girls are often not diagnosed with ADHD. And people of color are not diagnosed with ADHD or autism or other neurodivergent conditions. Often they're labeled as other things or just missed completely. So racism specifically can lead to misdiagnosis. So one example is that Black boys being diagnosed with a conduct disorder or oppositional defiant disorder rather than something like ADHD or autism. And so it can really impact folks if they have like multiple marginalized identities. And if you have kind of multiple marginalized identity, let's say that you're a queer person who also has autism, that might lead you to mask even further or kind of cover up those particular identities in a heteronormative and neurotypical society. So here's another quote that I think brings this concept home around intersectionality. So as a Black person, as a woman, as an autistic adult, as the mother of Black autistic children, and as an advocate, think about the world of autism research and practice. When it comes to autism, either they, or should I say you all, do not know, do not show, or do not care about Black, Indigenous people of color, BIPOC, very much. So I think this is another example of somebody with lived experience who not only has autism, but has children with autism, of just feeling really ignored and marginalized, not just because of that neurominority identity, but also because she is a person of color. All right, so let's talk about some of the impacts or consequences of ableism. I can't help myself. I've already mentioned masking a couple of times in this workshop series, so we have a definition there. This is when neurodivergent individuals hide or minimize their diversity to fit in with a neurotypical world. And as I've already stated, but it bears repeating, the more intersectional identities you hold, the more likely you are to mask for a variety of reasons, some related to straight up safety, let's say, but some just because trying to get by in the world, it can be easier sometimes, seemingly, to mask some of these qualities. But there are downsides as well, which we'll talk about. So when we receive negative feedback from our environment, or when there's interpersonal ableism happening or ableism at any level happening, we may internalize those messages. So we talked about internalized ableism a couple of slides ago, so that's an example of that. But we might also develop some externalizing symptoms. So in the last session on neurodiversity, Jessica talked about what we can describe as malware for neurodivergent brains, which can manifest in anxiety, depression, or other sort of mental health co-occurring disorders because it's just so stressful to move about the world as somebody who is seen as different or has a different brain, and having to deal with that and move through neurotypical spaces on a day-to-day basis can just be incredibly stressful and can make you anxious and can make you sad. And that can compound when you're also trying to mask the fact that you have a different type of brain at the same time. So we can see there is a lot of significant consequences of ableism for people who are neurodiverse moving through the world. So this is the first opportunity in this workshop where I'm going to invite you to take a few minutes to have some reflection on these particular questions. And so I'm going to read over the particular reflection questions, and I'd invite you to think about these or process this information however you learn best. So it could be just some quiet reflection, thinking about these questions in your brain, or if you're a person who learns well by writing things down, this might be a great opportunity to jot things down as well, but really engage with this in the way that you think will be most helpful. So here's the reflection questions, and this is adapted from an article called Accepting Your Child's ADHD Diagnosis, How to Embrace Neurodiversity, from a resource, Attitude, mag.com. So that's a pretty nice resource with some information about ADHD specifically, but may have some overlap with other neurodiverse conditions. So the questions we'd ask you to reflect upon are as follows. 1, what aspects of my loved one's identity am I not fully accepting? 2, what implicit biases might I have regarding neurodiversity? And 3, in what ways, if any, am I secretly hoping an issue/trait/aspect of who my loved one is will eventually go away, quote, or that they will ultimately become, quote, normal. So I'll be a little vulnerable in just a few minutes and share some of my reflections on these questions. But I'm going to go away for a sec to give you some literal space and time within this session to answer these questions for yourself. So take a few minutes to do your reflections, and then I'll be back to share some of mine and say farewell for this session. Okay, not sure that was enough time or if it was too much time for some of you. All of our brains are different, but please feel free if you would like to continue reflecting upon or contemplating these questions following our session together today. So one thing I wanted to share in terms of reflecting on question number 3 is that I do have a family member who is autistic, and sometimes their communication can be quite blunt. And as somebody who is neurodivergent myself, just in a slightly different way, I can have some sensitivities to that bluntness and that directness. And so for me, as both a person living with neurodivergence and supporting somebody with neurodivergence, sometimes it can be complicated because sometimes my needs and my, challenges can bump up against that of my family member when they have that form of communication. And so sometimes do I wish that would go away? Sure. And I think being neurodivergent myself has helped give me at least some perspective on the fact that this is the way that their brain works. I can remind myself about that and remind myself like it's not personal, but it is something that we just continue to work on in the context of our little family. And so I hope that's helpful as an example for you. And I hope these reflection questions and our discussion of ableism was useful today. These are new ideas, maybe for some of us. So just make sure you take good care of yourself as you continue to think about and process this information. And again, I really thank you for joining us for this workshop today about ableism, and I hope to see you again in future sessions. In the meantime, be well, WWU, and we'll see you next time.